So you pretty much can't go an evening without hearing some new article with respect to autism. And one of the things that happened back in 2000 is the American Academy of Pediatrics said we have to screen more. Well, still less than half of pediatricians screen. There was actually a study released this week that most well child care visits are less than 10 minutes. Okay? So kids we're still not screening. And what we're finding, though, is that, and I went online yesterday to see if I could find any more up-to-date statistics, but the last data from the U.S. Department of Education's 2002 report was actually a 1,354% increase in an 8-year period from 91-92 to 2000 and 2001. I bet you if we look 2001 to now, we'd find almost that again. It's been pretty explosive. I don't know a school district that hasn't been touched by this. The rate of increase is almost 50 times higher than the rate of increase for 28.4% for all other disabilities. Now, people have said, you know, why do you think that is? I think a lot of other kids who are getting diagnosed with other things have been pulled into the autism category in this day and age. Again, because it's one of the few things where school districts are having to put money behind it and you're able to get interventions. I've seen situations on the East Coast. I've seen it less so here where unless you had severe speech and language disabilities, you were not getting services in school. And if you did, you were lucky to get an hour a week, which won't do it. It's really a situation where only the worst kids are getting, in my experience, pretty much everywhere right now. The kids who are in the middle are falling through the cracks. Is that everybody else's experience or not so much? Somebody in a really good district where they're getting more? Military is trying to really step it up. Military is really trying to do a good job on this and do right by their families. So approximately 13% of children have a developmental disability, and that ranges that's the whole. So you'll hear 1 in 7, 1 in 6, new, these are Center for Disease Control statistics. Autism right now, we're kind of focused on 1 in 110. Kids have some sort of autism diagnosis, and that number is likely to increase. Developmental disabilities overall include mild disabilities such as speech and language impairments to serious developmental disabilities such as intellectual disabilities, CP, and autism. So that's all included, but that number 13% is the latest figure out of the CDC. These are stats out of the CDC, and I can give specific articles to you if anyone else is interested. Some of the statistics we're talking about, they're reported to occur in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups, yet are on average 4 to 5 times more likely to occur in boys than girls. And you know, some of the studies across nations, we still need more epidemiological data. So here we're saying that 36,500 children per 4 million will be diagnosed with an ASD. Now, one of the things that's happening right now is if you figure 10 years ago, you started seeing more kids diagnosed, what do you think's happening in terms of treatments and trends right now? Seeing a lot more kids, college age, adolescents, and the question becomes, what do you do? There's a great article in the New York Times, I think it was last week, about what are you going to do for employment for these folks? What are you going to do for independence? And one of the things that I'm going to talk about is that talk with your families about thinking about that now. You may not do it on the day you give the diagnosis, but I always do a follow-up session and say, we need to talk about long-term planning and we need to think about this now. And I know it's hard. You know, when you deliver the diagnosis, it's still one of the hardest things I do. I still, you know, am brought to tears at times. And at the day I'm not, I don't want to practice anymore because I think you've got to continue to be compassionate with these families. For a lot of families, they see it as loss of dreams, the death of a hope or a wish, and so honoring that and doing it in a compassionate, loving, caring way, I think it is incredibly important. I bring them back later to talk about the specifics. Where are we going next? What are we doing next? What services have you got to get? I allow them to grieve. And then we also talk about, okay, it's just you and your husband. Who's going to take care of the child if something happens to you too? And you need to think about that now. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our parents, is help them think about those things now in a way that's not scary. I do it at all ages because I don't know that anybody else will. You know, when I deliver the diagnosis, I try to be, first of all, I am, you know, try to be a partner for families. And the way I describe it personally is like any other health issue. So if you think about somebody who had heart disease or diabetes, at different points in their life, they're going to have to come back and see me or see another health professional, because whatever life's challenges, they're going to need a different set of coping skills than what they have today. So when they come back in, you know, I want them to understand, I want to try to normalize that procedure, that they'd come back in to see me, or somebody else if they choose not to see me, and that they would see this process of coming in and out of practice as part of the course of the disease. And so I talk about long-term planning. I always say to parents, look, I don't have a crystal ball, but these are the sorts of things I'd look for, and these are the sorts of issues we need to think about long-term. Because especially for college, it's one of the first, it's actually not surprising, but people have to start saving for college early on. So people will ask me very early on with little kids, will he be able or she be able to go to, usually it's a he, be able to go to college? And I'll say, he's going to do, you know, X, or we don't have a crystal ball, but I think it's a possibility, or, you know, I think that's going to be a tough decision. Studies in Asia, Europe, and North America have identified individuals with ASD with an approximate prevalence of 0.6% to over 1%, and a study out probably within the last 3 months in South Korea reported prevalence of 2.6%. So absolutely this is seen all over the world. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about California results. So in California, ages 3 to 11 rate of autism 2.5 times 2001 and 2005, from 3.1 per thousand to 7.8 per thousand. That's pretty huge. More than 36,000 children 11 in California were autistic in 2005. Parental reports. Ratio of boys with autism was 3.4 to 1 in 2005. Hispanic children were less likely to have autism than non-Hispanic children. According to parent reports, they found kids of color are less likely to get the diagnosis. Kids on Medicaid, Medi-Cal, actually I don't know Medicaid are less likely to diagnosis earlier. Some important trend. This is just talking about various studies. One seminal study you might want to look at if you're interested is the Brick Township study done that only 50% of children with ASD and 66 of those with autistic disorder had autism listed as their special education designation for services. So these were all recent studies which will basically say part of the issue is the way we get to autism under the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act is we look at records of what's in school records. Well, trying to understand prevalence from school records is not the best way, because we've all said we see a lot of kids who don't really have it, who carry the diagnosis, or who don't have the diagnosis. So looking at school records isn't the best, or just parental reports. The best way is for the CDC or another organization to do an epidemiological study, and those studies are now starting to produce results because they just started within the last 5 to 7 years. These are trends by state. Again, this is the latest data there. As of yesterday, I couldn't find anything more recent than 2003. So these are a little bit dated, and I apologize. As soon as they come out, I'll update these slides for us all and post them on my internet site. And this was a great website, fightingautism.org, and they don't exist anymore. They basically used to take all the Individuals with Disabilities in the Education Act information and synthesize it for you. All these sites can be found on the IDEA website, and if people want a reference, just let me know, email me. But this gives you an idea, ages 7 to 9 years old per 10,000 births. trends in autism. So look at 92, look at 97, and this was 203, right? Pretty dramatic. Now, begs the question, somebody asked.
Why are the numbers going up?
Yay, thank you. Why are the numbers going up? What do you guys think? When I see this sort of the non-believer in me, or the believer, whichever way you want to phrase it, definitely some sort of environmental key. Some sort of environmental focus.